All right, today's lesson is section 6.2 and it's properties of parallelograms. So remember, parallelograms are, actually I might as well just start writing it. They are a quadrilateral, so it has 4 sides. With both pairs of opposite sides parallel. So it's a quadrilateral, so I would picture it like a rectangle or a square that has been slanted or tilted to either the right or the left. Typically we slant them to the right, but they very well could be to the left. So we have a bunch of theorems today. We have 5 total, and this is really all the facts we need to know about parallelograms, so that way we can figure out different measures of sides and different angles and diagonals. So let's jump right into it. The first one, it says if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then opposite sides are congruent. Easy enough. So I know that QR and PS are going to be congruent, and RS and QP are going to be congruent. So I went ahead and labeled our parallelogram or our diagram to represent that, and now over here I'm going to put in the words. So QP is congruent to RS, and SP is congruent to QR. The second one says if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then opposite angles are congruent. So angle P is going to be congruent to angle R. So those two are congruent. And angle Q is going to be congruent to angle S. So opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent. The next theorem says if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then its consecutive angles are supplementary. So in order to help you with that, we know that it's called a parallelogram because opposite sides are congruent and they're also parallel. So if I just quickly, and you don't have to draw this, if I show that they're parallel and this is my transversal, then these two are consecutive interior angles. And we've already learned way back when, chapter 3 or 4, that consecutive angles add up to 180, so they're supplementary. So that means P plus Q is going to equal 180. That means Q plus R is going to equal 180. R plus S is 180, and S plus P is also 180 degrees. Another theorem, it says if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then its diagonals bisect each other. So remember, bisect means it splits it in half. Okay, so we're going to say, and I don't know if you guys need to put this on your paper, but obviously I do in my notes, that point M is right there. So if Q to S is a diagonal and P to R is a diagonal, and at that point M is where they bisect each other. So Q to M, so right here, is equal to M to S. And then, let me get a different color to show this one. P to M is the same as M to R. So P to M. All right, so there's our facts and theorems. I'm not exactly sure if your notes match this, but there is one other one that I have that's sort of, it's sort of a given, and maybe it's here somewhere, but maybe not. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw it quick just so we know. And what the one theorem says, in case it is on your notes, even though it's not on mine here, it says if a parallelogram has one right angle, then all 4 of them have to be right angles. And that should make sense because we know that opposite angles are congruent and that consecutive angles are supplementary. So that's actually going to make this parallelogram a rectangle. All right, so just in case that's on your notes, there we have it. All right, our first example, it says ABCD is a parallelogram. So that means we know all of those facts we just learned to be true. We have to find the lengths and the angle measures that are listed. So A is asking for the length of A to D. So A to D, let me get a bright color today. A to D is there. So we know, hey, that's the bottom side, so the top side is the exact same length. Oh, and when you know it, they actually gave me that length, so that length is 8. Now we need the measure of angle ADC. So if I follow that A to D to C, that's this whole angle here. Well, our one theorem says that opposite angles are congruent. So if I just do 65 plus 45, that's going to equal the measure of angle D. So 65 plus 45 is 110 degrees. So we know B is 110 degrees. E to C, well, that's here. We know that E to C is the same as A to E because that's the diagonal and they bisect one another. So if A to E is 5, E to C is also 5. Now let me erase some of this stuff because the last one says the measure of angle B to C to D. So B to C to D. If we look, that is the angle. If we knew angle A, we know that those two are equal, but we don't. But they did tell us that large angle B, and we also knew that this angle down here was 110. We know if they're side by side, they equal 180, so I can do the measure of angle D plus the measure of angle C equals 180. We know this is 110. So if I subtract 110 from both sides, we get the measure of angle C is 70 degrees. Perfect. So again, it's just using those facts that we had. So I want you guys to take a moment, pause the video, try this your turn, come back for our last example. Today's notes are pretty short. All right, so you've unpaused it, you're finished. B, I'm just going to go through this quickly, is 135 degrees because it is opposite this one. Sorry, that's really hard to read there. Let me try it again. So 135 degrees. There we go. A is opposite the other side, so that is 15. So A is 15, B is 135. E, if that's a right angle, that means that's a right angle. So E is going to be 90 degrees. D is opposite the 10, so that's 10 units. C, X is a side, so that's going to be 24, and Y is going to be supplementary to 60, so 180 minus 60, we get 120 degrees. D, oh my goodness, we have to find A, B, and C, so A, B, C. Oh, A is just 5 because it's half of the diagonal. B, oh, it's also half a diagonal, so those two are going to be congruent, so B is 3. And C, well, that's a side, so it's the same as the side opposite it, so that's 4. Perfect so far. All right, now for E, we have to find D, E, and F. All right, so I think F is going to be the easiest to find because F is the exact same thing as that one, so we're going to go with 82 for F, 82 degrees. Now, E and D are going to be the same, so as long as I find one, I find the other one. So to get D, we're going to take 180 minus 82. We get 98, so that means D is 98 degrees and E is 98 degrees. Okay, so it might take some time for you to get to learn all of these rules and facts. So have your notes handy, that way you can sort of flip back and forth. All right, last example. Guess what? It's the same thing except instead of just giving us numbers, they put some algebra in there. They gave us some algebraic expressions. So it says use algebra to find the value of each variable in the parallelograms. So to find, remember, opposite sides are congruent. So that means to get x, I'm going to do 2x minus 6 is equal to 4. So 2x is going to equal 10. X is going to equal 5. One of them is done. Same thing for y, except it's 2y is equal to 8. Divide both sides by 2, y is equal to 4. Perfect. All right, for B, okay, we know these are parallelograms. That's how we know all of these facts are true. So the diagonals bisect each other. And you know what? I'm going to change this one to a y. Let me see if I can erase that x. You might have to do this on your notes as well. All right, so we're going to make that a y because I know not all three of these are the same. So we do need it to have a different letter. I apologize for that mistake there. So we're going to do 3y minus 1 equals 10. So add 1 to both sides, and we get 11. But I'm wondering if on your paper it's plus. I'm going to do it both ways. So y is 11 thirds. And then if your paper has 3y plus 1, I'm going to do that up here, because then we would get 3y equals 9 and y equals 3. I'm not really sure which one your paper has. My paper has a plus, but yours may not. So if it has a plus, put a big plus sign, it should get 3. If your paper has a minus, you should get 11 thirds, which you could figure that out in decimal form. All right, now to find x. Hey, those two are opposite sides, so they should be equal. So x plus 5 equals 2x minus 1. So subtract x from both sides, 2x minus 1 is x. Add 1, we get 6, so x equals 6, no matter what. All right, again, pause the video, come back, check the last two your turns. All right, so if you come back in, I'm going to find x first. I know these two angles are supplementary. That means they add up to 180. I don't know why that always does that. So we're going to do 6x equals 180. Divide both sides by 6. We get x is 30. Y, those two should be equal. So I'm going to subtract 3 and get 6. Subtract 1 and get y. So y is 6. And last but not least, letter B. So I'm going to do x first. So those are opposite angles, so they should be equal to one another. So I'm going to do 3x minus 9 equals 2x plus 31. Subtract 2x from both sides. I get x equals, add 9. X is equal to 40. And finally, to find y, they're opposite sides, so they should be equal. So 4y plus 5 equals 2y plus 21. Subtract 2, we get 2y. Subtract 5, we get 16. So y is going to equal